In the name of the God who gives us happiness, blessedness, and joy, our Creator, our Redeemer, and our sustaining Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. Good morning. I decided on the spur of the moment at the 8 o'clock service to not preach in the pulpit, and it worked so nicely. Everyone was awake, as a matter of fact. We'll see how this works. Oh, we need the mic on. You've got me up there? Here, I'll talk louder too. That may help. I'm on. Good. So you'll hear even a little more easily that way. So I decided to do this down here at this service as well, and to talk with you in that particular way. And I want to begin this homiletical reflection in two ways. First of all, to say, I'm happy. How very wonderful, joyful it has been to be here this weekend, to connect with Peggy, whom I've known for a long, long time, and be hosted so well in the rectory in that way. To be with your vestry, and I see a warden sitting here alert and awake in that way. Good for you, Chris. And what a good vestry you have. And what a good moment this is in the life of this congregation to move forward with joy and optimism and realism and with hope. So the first part of beginning is to say thank you for being here, for being able to be a part of this worship, of this life, and to this afternoon be part of the gathering of the Spirituality Center too. What a great thing, and I'll say more about that later. The second way I want to begin is with a question that suddenly emerged from our oldest daughter when she was maybe 5 or 6, and we don't know why it emerged, how it emerged, what was going on necessarily, but she would suddenly, just out of the blue, say to me, "Daddy, are you happy?" Well, thanks, Katie. And then she'd go elsewhere in the house and I'd hear, "Mommy, are you happy?" And then I'd hear, as if Anna at 3 could say much in response to that, "Anna, are you happy?" You get the idea here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I believe that is the question of the gospel today. It is about happiness. It is about blessedness. It is about joy in itself. And it connects to such a central, visceral question in our own souls, doesn't it? Are you happy? We want to be. There's a whole industry, if you take the train down into the city on this a particular roadway called Madison Avenue, that tells you how you can be happy, right? If you buy this or do that or so forth. There are tens of thousands of books if you go to the self-help section of a library or a bookstore on how you can be happy. Pundits and comedians have taken it. I'll let you in on my favorite definition of happiness from how many of you remember George Burns, the great comedian of yore? Good. We see we can age happily together. His definition of happiness was a large, warm, caring, involved family in a city far, far away. Well, Jesus gets into that happiness question this morning. That's what it is about. Huh? That's not what he said. We heard it in English, right? Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are you, blessed is this, and blessed is that. But having been an old classic scholar in my school and in my undergraduate days, and then you have to kind of do that when you go to seminary in a certain way, you read a lot of Greek. The word that is used that we translate as blessed in the original version, the original Greek that Matthew wrote it in, is a wonderful word. It is makarios, which means in Greek, happy. Happy? Happy are the poor in spirit. Happy are those who hunger for righteousness and thirst for meaning. Happy are those who mourn. Happy are you when people revile you and persecute you and really speak bad things about you. We're going to get into it. But somehow Jesus is talking in his own time about happiness that leads to blessedness, that leads to joy, that leads to connection and dependence on God. That's what it's about. Now, part of my school life was having to translate that word, but not in the New Testament so much, more so in the various tombs and epitaphs that were found around the Mediterranean world in that time of Jesus. The word makarios was used, and then it would be translated. You'd translate it, well, happy are those who had a lot of wealth. That would be on a tomb. Happy are those who were initiated into the right mystical society. That would be on a tomb. Happy are those who had a handsome family. I like that too, on good days. You get the idea? There were lots of ways of being happy according to the world around Jesus, just like there is in the world around us. So Jesus is probably not standing. I think he's sitting on this beautiful hillside. Maybe some of you have been there. You can go to the Holy Land now, and there's a hillside that goes down into the Galilean lake and to the Sea of Galilee, and it's beautiful. And it's by tradition the place where these words, which we call the Beatitudes, the happiness words, were spoken, where Jesus was doing his teaching, but he goes wild and radical and different. And he says, okay, happiness can come from the beautiful sunset that I saw last night over the harbor here. Happiness can come from having enough to pay your bills. Happiness can come I now work for an arts and culture foundation in Indianapolis, from the beauty and joy of arts, of performing arts and visual arts. There's a lot of happiness around, but if you want real, deep, transforming happiness, look here. Look here. Happy are the poor in spirit. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Happy are those who mourn. Now, what is he getting at here? I think what he's getting at is the necessity and the invitation and the joy and the possibility of knowing that we are connected to God and that we can depend on our Creator, our Redeemer, our Sustainer. Happy are you when that happens. Happiness is when that happens. What an invitation. What a grace that is. It can help us in the times of the greatest turmoil and turbulence in our lives, in fact. I mean, we all got the news yesterday that there had been a shooting and a beating in Memphis, Tennessee, and this whole question of where we are in our society now about those who are meeting violence, about police that are put in positions where they respond with violence, even probably because they don't know what to do at that point. What's going to help us to live through that? What's going to help us to be transformed by that? What's going to help us to make meaningful response to that? And I would suggest, as Jesus does in Matthew's gospel today, it is happiness and blessedness and fulfillment and joy. That's what's going to do it. That's what's going to do it. Sit down with those Beatitudes. Take your worship program home today and read them sort of in this way. Start off by looking and saying, happy are those who are poor in spirit. That just means, happy am I when I know my need of God, and when I have a kind of sense of humility and wanting to approach God. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Happy am I when I really hunger for something that can give meaning and the food of life and transformation and spirit in my life. Happy am I when I can really enter the skin of someone else, especially when they are sorry or sorrowful or not knowing what's going to happen next in their life. That's a blessing. That's a cause to enter in a new way. Happy am I. Happy are we. Happy are you, even when we take a position in our lives that goes first to God's love and secondly to other things. You see, it's all about happiness. It's all about blessedness. It's all about joy. What Jesus is doing here is not trying to set up a whole new moral construct. What he's trying to do is saying you can be that close to God that your life can be changed and transformed and inspirited and encouraged in that way. This weekend has been great for me. This is my, sometimes people, how many of you have ever served on the vestry of this parish? Go ahead and raise your hands. Be honest about it. Take pride in it, you know that. So some people who have served on vestries wince when I say, vestries are my hobby. Okay? Well, that's only because I've been blessed throughout my ministry, not doing a lot of different things and interesting things, but because leadership has been my kind of second call along with philanthropy, of thinking about how people shape communities, how people help others to grow in the communities that they care about in that way. Well, let me tell you, that's in observation of your vestry yesterday, that's where Trinity Church Southport is right now. As I observe the leadership of your clergy, that's where Trinity Southport is right now. At a place of happiness, yes, challenge. At a place of joy, yes, some confusion, as there always is, because we live in a confused world, a confused life. The VUCA world, the leadership educators call it, which is volatility, ambiguity, uncertainty. Does this sound like some things that happen on a daily basis? And yet, piercing through it all is the joy, the blessing, the happiness, the rejoicing of God. That's where you are. Invited to the happiness that comes from generosity, the happiness that comes from service, the happiness that comes from real community, being in this in thick and thin together. And with the spirituality center too. It's the same thing of allowing, and this is true of all of us, true of me at least, of all of us who are still seeking and searching and wondering how to connect with God, to say there are some pathways of learning and experience that can happen in a spiritual way. And yes, maybe you want to come to 10 o'clock church too, that's fine. But that there are ways of blessing and happiness in the Spirit that can be yours. You know, the remarkable last happiness that Jesus talks about in these Beatitudes, and that sitting on that beautiful hillside on the Sea of Galilee. He talks about the happiness, he says, you know, it's about poverty of spirit, it's about knowing you depend on God, it's about being able to not be vengeful and vindictive, it's about building peace in this world, it's about discovering unity and hope. He says all that, and then he looks you right in the eye, and he says, happy are you. That's your right, that's your gift, that's your joy. Happy are you even when things are tough, because you are blessed by the God who created you. That's the invitation for this day. That's the invitation of the life of this community of faith. That's the invitation of a center, a community that is growing and gathering around spiritual renewal and spiritual discovery. What a joy, what a happiness, what a blessing. Amen.